हेलो फ्यूचर डॉक्टर्स, वेलकम बैक। आज के इस एक्सप्लेनर में हम ब्रेक डाउन करेंगे द एब्सोल्यूट ट्रूथ अबाउट द नीट 2026 पेपर। देखो, एज योर फ्रेंडली मेंटर, I know exactly what you guys went through in that exam hall. You walked in with certain expectations, maybe based on your mock tests or last year's paper, right? But reality hit hard the moment you started reading those questions. Today, we are taking a deep, data-driven look at that expectation versus the actual exam hall reality. We aren't just going to sit here and say it was tough or it was easy. We're going to prove exactly why you felt the way you did using the raw NTA data.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this quote right here from Rahul in Lucknow, it perfectly captures the vibe. He said, felt the paper was heavier than last year. Time management was tough in the last 30 minutes. Does this sound familiar? I know it does. Let me tell you, your panic in those final 30 minutes was completely valid. The hidden villain of this exam wasn't just impossibly tough concepts. It was pure, unadulterated time pressure. You weren't just fighting the NTA syllabus, you were fighting the clack in a way we literally haven't seen in recent years.
So, यहाँ है हमारा आज का roadmap. First, we'll do a quick 2025 versus 2026 paper comparison. Second, the shift in subject difficulty. Third, that crazy exam hall time pressure. Fourth, why biology was lengthy and tricky. Fifth, changing trends in chapter weightage. And finally, your key takeaways and the expected cutoff.
All right, starting with Section 1, the 2025 versus 2026 paper comparison. Think back to what you expected based on last year.
And this brilliantly illustrates the shift. Dekho, in 2025, we had direct NCERT MCQs, a beautifully balanced pacing, and honestly, a manageable physics section. But 2026, it completely flipped the script. We got hit with calculation-heavy physics, multi-statement biology questions, and just intense time pressure. The 2026 paper shifted from simple memory recall to a grueling test of your stamina and your calculation speed. Basically, it wasn't just about what you knew anymore. It was about how incredibly fast you could process it.
Moving right along to Section 2, the shift in subject difficulty. Let's see what actually caused the biggest headaches. Now look at this overall data. We had 85 easy questions, 78 medium, and only 17 hard questions across the entire 180 you had to attempt. I mean, on paper, that looks like a very reasonable, easy to moderate exam. So why did it feel so tough? Well, the answer lies in where those tricky questions were clustered. Physics alone demanded so much complex calculation time that it warped everyone's perception of the entire paper's difficulty. The concepts weren't necessarily mind-bending, but the execution, that's what took forever. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the distribution between Class 11 and Class 12. Class 12 slightly dominated, taking up 52.2% of the overall syllabus weightage, compared to 47.8% for Class 11. What does this mean? It heavily favored candidates who had really strong, recent conceptual clarity right out of their 12 standard boards. It was mostly balanced, sure, but that slight edge to Class 12 definitely made a real impact. Okay, Section 3. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, the exam hall time pressure. We've got another quote here, this time from Arav in New Delhi, and honestly, this is the unofficial tagline for NEET 2026. Physics had tricky numericals, biology was easy but very time-consuming due to long statements. Guys, Arav's experience was literally universal. Physics drained your time right at the start, leaving you frantically rushing through a surprisingly long, reading-heavy biology section. Ye situation almost har bate ke saath hui hai. So if this was you, take a deep breath, you aren't alone. So what were the specific traps that ate up those precious minutes? Well, physics was absolutely dominated by multi-step numericals. You couldn't just plug in a single formula and move on. Then biology threw in a massive volume of match-the-column formats. This required absolute line-by-line reading of your NCERT text. Ultimately, this paper didn't reward panicked, last-minute problem-solving. No way. It tested pure discipline and steady pacing. If physics made you panic, biology punished you, simply because you just ran out of time to read those massive sentences. Which brings us perfectly to Section 4, biology, lengthy and deceptive. So the crucial point we need to understand is this absolute paradox. Biology was the easiest section in terms of pure content. It really was. Every expert agrees it was strictly NCERT-based. But it was incredibly time-consuming to physically read. You weren't just glancing at a question and ticking A, B, C, or D. Nope, you had to read through literal paragraphs of options before you could even make a choice. And the numbers here are just staggering. Walk through this table with me.
In botany, there were 11 multi-statement questions and 9 match-the-column questions. In zoology, 17 multi-statement questions and 10 match-the-column. That's a grand total of 28 multi-statement and 19 match-the-column questions. ध्यान से देखो इस डेटा को. This specific format forced you to verify 4 or 5 different facts simultaneously just to get one answer right. No wonder you guys felt so exhausted.
Plus, there were some truly unexpected shifts. Like, there was a complete absence of assertion-reason questions in zoology. I mean, who saw that coming, right? Also, 0 complex genetics numericals in botany. Botany was highly direct, but again, heavily text-based. NTA is clearly shifting away from rote memorization in tricky math and biology, and instead they're testing your ability to differentiate between closely related concepts. Deep conceptual reading was literally the only way to win this section. All right, Section 5. Let's look at the chapter Weightage, Changing Trends, and see where the marks actually came from. Let's move to this slide and see how this builds our future strategy. These chapters right here emerged as massive heavy hitters. Principles of Inheritance and Variation, a whopping 7 questions. Biodiversity and Conservation, Biomolecules and Biotechnology, Principles and Processes each gave us 5 questions. That is a massive chunk of your total score concentrated in just 4 chapters. For any 2027 aspirants watching this explainer, mastering these specific high-yield chapters is absolutely non-negotiable for sure. And within biology itself, the class focus was split in a really fascinating way. Botany heavily favored class 12, taking up 55.1% of the questions. Meanwhile, zoology leaned heavily into class 11, with 56.1% coming from 11th standard topics. So, class 12 botany and class 11 zoology were essentially the true battlegrounds this year. Finally, Section 6, Final Takeaways and the Expected Cutoff. Based on all the expert data, here are the expected cutoff shifts. For the UR and EWS categories, we're looking at a slight drop from last year's 686 to 144 range, down to about 685 to 140. For OBC and SC, we're seeing a similar small dip. Listen, a small drop in scores is a completely natural result of the intense time pressure and that calculation-heavy physics section you all faced. So if your scores are looking a tiny bit lower than you initially hoped, do not panic. The paper was objectively lengthier. And I really want to highlight this specific number on the screen, 160. Because of the sheer length of this paper, experts widely agree that achieving 160 to 170 good, accurate attempts out of the 180 questions was actually a very strong performance this year. If you had to leave some questions behind because the clock just ran out, trust me, you are not alone. This year was a test of survival as much as it was a test of knowledge. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with this crucial thought. Speed, yet accuracy. Your NEET 2027 strategy can be defined. Are you going to double down on your calculation speed to tackle physics, or are you going to focus on razor-sharp reading accuracy for biology? Take some time to reflect on this. Analyze your own exam hall experience using the data we just went through